Hello. And I have to say that I am really glad to see that the unions, those bastions of socialism that have done so much and continue to do so much for the British working person, are still keeping their eyes on the ball and watching out for the British working person and his or her needs and wants. Yes, so I'm going to dive right into this. It says here, Unison, that's one of the biggest unions in Britain. Unison votes unanimously, they're all of a mind, for trans equality in local government. How about that? That means that people who are involved in local government and belong to the Unison union, and that would include, I suppose, some teachers, administrators, I suppose it would involve even street sweepers and fetchers and carriers, really. Anyone who works in local government who happens to belong to Unison is now committed to trans equality. I mean, like nobody was before. I mean, nobody thought that somebody who was trans could vote or had the right to a job or social help if they needed it, you know. Now they do. Now we all know, and if we're employed by a local council, we really have to stick with that because they gave a unanimous commitment to that. A commitment to provide members with materials to counter the gender critical narrative is agreed. So it means that you are going to, if you belong to Unison, you're going to get a stack of literature on trans rights. You lucky people, how lucky you are to be so well educated. Yeah, there's nothing in this bump about ordinary working class members, you know, wages, pensions, holidays, maternity, you know, oh, maternity especially not. No, because for maternity you have to be of a sex which shall not be named. Okay, let's carry on. Speaking in support of the motion, Unison LGBT plus delegate Anu Prasha commented on the hostile media treatment of trans women, in particular saying, "This is the same tactic used against gay men in the Section 28 era." That's when, I think it was Thatcher, wasn't it? They put a law through that said you can't talk to school children about homosexuality. It's a bit like don't say gay. But I won't say that. Okay, when they were portrayed as sexual predators and a danger to children. We've seen it all before. Oh, yes, we have, haven't we? I mean, trans people. Now, you see, I have to, again, make this point. There are two sorts of trans people, and the problem with the terminology here is that they conflate the two of them. One sort is the sort of person who, I'm talking now, it's mostly about men they're referring to here. And I'm going to concentrate on that because that seems to be the area that's most problematic, as they say. You get men who have something called gender dysphoria and they wish to be women. They wish to look like women. They wish to act like women. They wish to sort of live a female role in society, however they see that. And they go through all sorts of awful medical procedures and become medicalised for the rest of their lives with hormones and reconstructive surgery, which has to be repeated and that sort of thing. And all of these things can go horribly wrong, and they're taking terrible risks, and they do it because they really can't live happily any other way. That's one sort of trans person. I have respect for those people, but again, so long as they stick to some rules, like not taking part competitively in women's sports, because still they were men and they do have a natural advantage, you know, they are still genetically men. But they wish to live as women, and most of them do quietly and successfully. then there's the other sort. Now, very often these are people who have not changed sex in any way. If you strip them, they would look like men, except maybe they've got silicone breast implants. But they have no wish to remove their genital organs or modify them in any way. And this is, for instance, that Leah Thomas, is that the second name? Anyway, original name William, who is winning swimming competitions. And, by the way, gets changed in a female changing room, even though he has not changed his genital organs, and embarrasses all the women in the changing room. And it's disgraceful. But yeah, that's just my opinion. Obviously not the opinion of Unison, but then I'm not a member of Unison. Okay, speaking in support of the motion, Anu Prashar says that trans people are portrayed as awful people. Well, my suggestion is those people who wish to take over women's spaces and do not wish to look like women are indeed awful people. Even if it's only making the women uncomfortable around them, it's still awful. Okay, so yeah, you get these men, they're dressed as women, they're prancing around in wigs, short skirts and ridiculous false eyelashes, and they say that makes them women and they should be treated like ladies. And this is what Unison says. This is why our union needs to be, the fact that some people don't like this, especially gender critical women, because of course women are always at the receiving end of social disapproval, if there's any social disapproval going around. This is why our union needs to be at the forefront of this debate, making sure our trans members are able to go to work free of fear, harassment and bullying. You know what? They're the bullies. Yeah, what about women who don't have public toilets to themselves anymore? Now, I'm going to tell you my service station story. I have mentioned it before. I was driving along the M60 probably, I don't know. Anyway, we stopped off at a service station. I went into the ladies' lavatories and there was a thing there in a wig, and a lot of makeup and a short skirt, and it's absolutely certain it was a he, was in the middle of the open space, the space where there were the sinks and the mirrors and the machines that dispense sanitary items of various sorts and that sort of thing. And he was there with his skirt hoiked up, adjusting a suspender belt. And I went into the lavatories, I used the lavatory, I came out, I washed my hands, I dried them, I walked out. He was still there fiddling with this one suspender belt. What do you call them? Garter belts in America. Anyway, with the clip at the top of the stocking. And all the time, he was looking round at the women and girls. That's bullying. I was uncomfortable. I didn't have a small child there. I wasn't adjusting her underwear or anything like that. But I had to go into the cubicle to get privacy. If I'd have needed to, adjust my bra or deal with something, I wouldn't have been able to do it outside because of that person. Now, that is an example of fear, harassment and bullying. And if I had to deal with that chap in my work environment every day, if every time I went into the factory lavatories, that person was there, or I was worried that person was going to be there, I wouldn't find that a very pleasant work environment either. And Unison, which is supposed to be protecting me from that, is taking the side of that. Okay, the motion also encouraged the negotiation of inclusive language in local government agreements and policies, urging branches to promote the fact sheet, why pronouns are important, and ask employers to adopt a policy that allows all staff to have their pronouns on name badges, ID cards and email signatures. We're into Jordan Peterson territory here, aren't we? Compelled speech and forced language. Ms. Prashar said, "You don't have to be trans to fight for trans rights. You can be a trans ally." Oh yes, roll over, doggy. Down, boy. We have a new training programme on being a trans ally and are rolling it out across branches and regions. They actually used the word roll there. Okay, so we're going to have indoctrination classes as well, are we? This is a feature of the mad end of socialism. I was a quite enthusiastic socialist when I was younger. It was nice to think of a more equal society, but I didn't realise how awful it could get, how far it could go. The theory's all right, but in practice, people just keep getting worse and worse about it. And it ends up with people being compelled to parrot formulae they know ain't so. But they have to do it anywhere. It's sort of like, it's like a mental exercise in taking on what George Orwell referred to as doublethink. I do wish I had another book to use as an example. 1984 seems to be coming up far too often recently. The motion also included a commitment to provide members with materials to counter the gender-critical narrative and provide information on the links between the gender-critical movement in the UK and the far right. Hang on a minute. Now, first of all, gender critical, that would include me. It means anyone who speaks out in any way against this trans ideology is gender critical, and that automatically equals bad. Okay, so you've got to have literature that you fill your head with so you can't get the gender critical message, and it's indoctrination literature, basically, isn't it? The UK and the far right. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Hang on. Conference agreed that targeting a minority and spreading false information to provoke hatred and distrust by preying on people's fears are classic far-right recruitment tactics. Now, this is how the left deal with anyone they disagree with. They say they're far right, and that means you've got to dismiss them. I'm reading a book by Jack Buckby right now. It's called Of Their Own Making. Now, Jack Buckby used to be literally in the far right. He was a member of the British National Party as a teenager, and he didn't, he was a teenager, and it was I suppose, internet days, really, and he didn't realise quite how bad some of the BNP were. What he saw was the rank and file of the BNP, many of whom were just people who were concerned about what they saw as the swamping of their communities by immigrants of completely unassimilated, or rather unintegrated people who most of the time didn't even speak English, and you couldn't communicate with them. The whole neighbourhoods would just sort of disintegrate under the weight of that. One of the things that Buckby talks about, Buckby actually saw the danger in the end, and he's gone into now talking, writing and speaking about, public speaking that is, about the dangers of the far right. Now, this was something about which I had very little knowledge, actually. I knew about the dangers of the far left. I sort of had dismissed the far right as next to non-existent, but Buckby actually says they're a lot more existent than everyone thinks. The only problem is they're quieter and they're more diffuse on the internet. However, Buckby's book is called Of Their Own Making, and I would advise you to read it if you come across it. The point he's making is that the left are actually creating the right. Now, I don't know whether he says that. I haven't got to the end of the book yet. But what I say is, I think they know that, the left. They want to make a far right because that will, well, some of them do anyway, that will give them the excuse to clamp down in some way. Like what's been happening in Canada, really. Trudeau made the truckers into the far right, and that gave him the excuse to clamp down, to shut down bank accounts, to stop movement, and it was terrible. But that gave him the excuse. And now, actually, there are court cases going on about the legality of closing bank accounts, but that's another matter. Anyway, one of the things that Buckby talks about is the way media companies are complicit in that, and they make, well, for instance, he talks about them, one company making a program about Nazis and then including interviews with people who are not Nazis, but lumping them in. So, for instance, something like an ally type television show might interview Nazis, and then people like Douglas Murray or Dave Rubin, and then refer to everybody there, not to say that Douglas Murray and Dave Rubin are far right, but somewhere along the line they'll talk about, and these were the far right people we interviewed, and that gives them the excuse. If, for instance, Dave Rubin says, you called me far right and I'm not. And they'll say, oh, we didn't mean you, we meant the other guys. But they're all lumped together in an attempt to put that message in the minds of the people watching. That's why nobody trusts, well, nobody with any sense trusts the MSM anymore. Okay, speaking in support of the motion, Jenny Black condemned the UK government as the laughingstock of Europe. I wouldn't say that. I'd say we were maybe Macron's worst nightmare, but that's something else. Saying that it has fallen from the leading LGBT plus country in Europe to the 14th due to the treatment of trans people. So that's how you judge the viability and strength of a country, by how well it treats its LGBT plus whatever else they want to identify themselves as people. What? Yeah, anyway, let's see. Luca Di Mambro Moore from Unison Surrey country branch, or is that county branch? Anyway, spoke of how local councils have been pressured to withdraw from the Stonewall Diversity Champions scheme. Right, because Stonewall is now more for trans than lesbian or gay rights. Lesbian and gay people are now being persecuted by organisations like Stonewall because they're going in for LGBT alphabet soup plus people now, in preference to people who really need some support. And that the climate of transphobia is not transphobia. People aren't afraid of trans people, real ones. What they're afraid of is cross-dressers with mental illnesses. In the UK has led to more non-trans women being challenged on their gender, being targeted because they don't look woman enough. And there you have the problem. Because there are women who look more masculine, and they get now challenged when they're going into women's spaces. That's just the point, isn't it? This is where the trans nutters, and I'm saying trans nutters to differentiate them from trans people, a different group, yeah? That's where the trans nutters are taking us. These are people who parody women. They wear this ridiculous makeup and these ludicrous costumes. And they actually hate women. They've been known frequently to get physically violent with women. And they want to replace women. They hate women so much, they want to replace them. And this is the thin end of the wedge. This is where they are starting. They are causing women, real pain, real discrimination because of their behaviour, not the women's behaviour, the trans nutters' behaviour. And this is just the beginning. It's going to get worse. And this is what Unison is putting its back behind. This is a trade union that is supposed to protect working people. And what it's turned into is a cross-dresser's ally. Disgraceful. Okay, I'm Granniopteryx. I am to be found on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. I let you know when I've uploaded a new video on Twitter, Gab and Parler, where I am at Granniopteryx. Please subscribe to one of those because YouTube doesn't always let you know when I put a new video up. Okay, well, please click that like button and click the subscribe button, and they all help me with the algorithm, and share the video and contribute to the channel if you can, and see you next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Granniopteryx design or Granbo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.granniopteryx.com, and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.